Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? What is it? It's Friday. Yeah. Woo! All right, party. I'm leaving. I love Fridays. All right, Fridays are pretty good. It's Friday, September 17th, 2021. We're back live on the air. By we, I mean me. So you're here too. If I'm here and you're here, doesn't that make it our time? And what are we going to do with our time? This morning, Kagro in the Morning Show is live now. And the silent democratic revolution, Bill tells us, is underway by the Democrat Party and Joe Biden to take over the country. It's true. Wait till we talk a little bit about that. So what is Kagro X going to do? Well, I'll ask myself. What am I going to do? So I says to myself, he's going to read this tweet and ruin the secret. Great job. So, all right, it's out. It's true. We're revealing the great secret. Where did this come from? It was over the last day or so. Feels like over the weekend because I was off yesterday, and if you were off the way I was off yesterday, you feel like an entire weekend has passed. But you're lighter, so that's good news too. Let's see. Here's apropos of nothing. Twitter tells me what's happening is that Prince Philip's will remain sealed for 90 years, which. All right. Does that mean like sealed from the public or sealed from everybody? Like, I'm not going to give you any money and I'm not going to tell you about it. I don't know. Who cares? That's not really any of our business. But I don't know. For some reason, it's up top of the news. Also, at the top of the news, I should just let Twitter be my assignment desk. It's probably pretty good at that. Dan Patrick is on it, and he's in the news this morning, and something people have been tweeting about. And Laura Loomer, also in the news. To get that one out of the way, Laura Loomer, white supremacist idiot, has got COVID-19 and making a show of it. She's in Florida, so she's like, of course I'm unvaccinated because the vaccine is terrible for you, she says, and unsafe, she says, both of which are wrong. You should get the vaccine and get a booster. What the hell? My audience, look, you're vaccinated. Get another one. Go ahead. Anyway, Laura Loomer has got it. And I guess she chained herself to the doors of a Regeneron clinic, I imagine, because that's what she does. I don't know why she would have to do that. They're open to the public. She was making a big deal of it. She's going the Regeneron route, which, I think the treatment costs about 15 times what it costs to get a vaccine. Vaccine, of course, free to the public. But in terms of development costs and the costs that the government paid to the manufacturers to get the vaccine, couple $100 perhaps, and versus a couple $1,000 for the Regeneron. She's going to go get it, and we don't know whether she really has COVID or whether she's really getting Regeneron. It could just be, for Laura Loomer, it could be, what the hell, why don't I just say I have it, and it's terrible, and I went to get the free Regeneron from Ron DeSantis, and now I'm cured, and then I'll put out a TikTok video of myself doing cartwheels, and then chaining myself to the door, and then everyone will believe it, and Ron DeSantis will be reelected. That's the kind of person that Laura Loomer is. She might very well do something like that. On the other hand, she may have COVID, in which case, well, I just cleared my account yesterday. But go COVID. All right. Well, next year I got to have something to talk about. All this fasting has to be for something. If I'm just starving because I haven't done anything, what a waste. And I'll think of something to do in between now and then. Dan Patrick is also in the news. Let me first get to the secret plot that Bill forced me to reveal unwittingly because he wrote it down and I just read whatever he says. I may want to sort of think about redoing that plan. Mighty OCD thinks I've been into Manischewitz this morning. That's a possibility. We were out of Manischewitz at the moment, but not because I had it all this morning, but, there would be some side effects. Let's say that. One of which would be retching violently. It's not great. Anyway, what was it we were talking about? Oh, yes, right. The big takeover plan. I think I'll scroll back in the feed to, I saw a couple of people retweeting this because this was insane, obviously. And was that part of Dan Patrick's comments? So we might link the two of them together. It might just be two really incredibly stupid things that got said in the same interview. I guess it is. Yeah. All right. So part one of the dumb from Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick being interviewed on the Laura Ingraham show, which I guess technically could count as part two of the dumb, but I was thinking of the two dumb things that Dan Patrick said. Which was, this one got some commentary last night. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick saying, "Let me tell you something, Laura." That's already dumb. And everyone watching, okay, "The revolution has begun," he said. Now, you might be thinking, when I first saw it and read it, I thought, oh, he's talking about like January 6th, and this weekend is the big protest. Well, I guess we could talk a little bit about that too. But I have big plans of things to talk about today. Big protest in D.C. The January 6th people, initially anyway, were set to return to Washington to protest the continued detention of at least some of the January 6th protesters, like the worst of the worst. And they were going to come and protest and say they're political prisoners, and we don't do that in America, but we do that in America. We don't do that to white people in America. They have a point there. And now we are, and they're very upset about it, and they were going to come and have a big protest. And this was the big follow-up. And you remember, of course, when we were kicking them all out of Washington, D.C. the first time, they said, "We're going to go back and get our guns, and now you'll be sorry." And so we were a little worried about that. The security fencing is going back up this weekend. I imagine this time the police will be better prepared, by which I mean the police that are on our side and want to preserve the Union and protect the Capitol and the members of the government from attack, not the police that were on the other side who are in trouble. And all 6 of them are getting in big trouble. I think there are probably more, but 6 was what they could prove it with. And we have interesting material about that as well. But the revolution that he's talking about, boy, I have to have a lot of notes for what I got to get back to. I'll never remember all of this. The revolution he's talking about is the silent revolution, which is a great kind of revolution for the weekend, especially if it's early in the morning. I really appreciate it. It won't really help much because there's a pair of doves that live around here that hoot in the morning and wake me up. But anyway, a silent revolution is coming. And guess what? This revolution is, well, I was going to say it's ours. It's our revolution. And I don't mean Bernie Sanders' our revolution. I mean you and me. This is a silent revolution by the Democrat Party, he says, and Joe Biden to take over this country. And we are reminded, of course, both by the tweet of Oliver Willis that I retweeted this morning and someone else, I'll scroll back further, last night making the same point. Yeah, it kind of was overt, the big revolution where we took over the country, where we voted, and then the person who got the most votes got to become president of the country and kind of take over that country. It was a huge revolution. It's called voting. They don't like it. And I guess that's why they weren't really used to seeing it happen and why they tried to overthrow the results on January 6th. Similarly, yeah, it was our friend Christina who tweets, you may already be following her, as CLN, I imagine those are her initials, CLN 0103. And if I had to do some decoding and or hacking of your accounts, I'd say, is that maybe, I don't know, some significant date or something? Everybody try to guess her password now. Don't do that. Leave her alone. She had a good tweet, in response to the same clip saying, well, I sure as hell hope so. We did elect him to do just that, after all. And quite so. Oliver Willis putting it in his own terms. I mean, last November was pretty loud, to be honest. Democratic voters basically said, yes, we are taking over the country. You killed too many people. I like that formulation of it as well. Speaking of which, just in case you're not up to date, we are up to or abutting 680,000 COVID deaths, according to Worldometers. I also noticed people have been pointing out to me that I guess the New York Times / Johns Hopkins count, which I think had been slightly behind in time of the Worldometers count. I don't know whether the Hopkins count has passed it, but the New York Times seems to be either counting faster or has different stats or is jumping the gun, trying to scoop me. That's, I'm sure, their focus. And calling out numbers before Worldometers puts them up. But, Worldometers is just one of many different things, and no one's going to be able to get a perfect bead on these numbers as they happen. But this morning's news from Worldometer, 688,488 dead from COVID, semi-officially. We still think that with excess deaths, we're, I think, probably past 1 million by now. I think the last time we actually discussed excess deaths, we were at 900-something thousand was the guess, and that was probably 2 months ago. 689,000 something will bring us right around the population of Memphis, Tennessee, I believe, which would be about the 21st or probably the 21st largest city in America, just to bring you up to speed on that metric. Anyway, let's see. Let me see if I can unravel all the breadcrumbs I left for myself. One, this weekend's, I'm also going to have to find links for some of these things now that I'm thinking about them off the cuff, but this weekend's big protest is questionable in terms of whether or not it materializes. The weather in D.C., we've had some real downpours in the last couple of days, but it's supposed to be clear for the weekend. So the weather probably won't get in their way, but they're getting in their own way. Apparently, I'm not certain what's driving it, but people who watch this stuff were saying the pre-gathering vibe is very different. And not in a bad way, like for us, like, oh my God, this time they're all driving here with truck bombs. But they might be. But this time they're in disarray. Insurrectionists in disarray is the new theme of the day. But last time there was lots of chatter about, we're all going, and there were people tweeting pictures of themselves getting on planes and buses and whatnot and into their cars and headed to D.C. And one, that's not happening, which would be better operational security if they really were planning something. But two, there's been some weird infighting, which, who knows? Maybe that's their idea of misdirection play. But there's, I suspect it's more a product of their conspiratorial minds. Some of the people who, I guess, have some sway, some influencers among them, have been saying, don't go to D.C. on the 17th because it's a setup. It's an FBI honeypot. They're trying to lure us in, and then they're going to grab us up and put us in prison, which, is something that I would imagine probably does crop up from time to time in their minds in these conspiratorial circles. But good, watch out for that. Yeah, we're going to arrest you all, so don't come. I think that's a very fine and functional rumor, and we should stick with it. And it reminds me that the other day there was what was it? There was another event scheduled that the right wing was calling on everybody to gather for, and they were saying we expect thousands and thousands of people, and 300 showed up. I thought I had put something aside about that, because now I can't remember what the hell they were getting together for. But, just one of their rally things. I really thought we had put that aside somewhere, but perhaps it's in the Twitter feed and easier to find that way. But anyway, they seem to be having difficulty raising the crowds at the same level these days. So I'll try and dig up some links to prove that to you. I mean, it happened. You probably saw the news. We'll see if we can't dig it up. Anyway, I wanted to finish up at least with Dan Patrick. Dan Patrick went on in this particularly stupid interview to say more horrific things. And the second part of the stupid of his interview was apparently, as Justin Baragona says, this is just unadulterated white genocide, great replacement theory stuff from Dan Patrick. He is, Justin, a media reporter for the Daily Beast, and tweeting about the very same interview on, what's her name, Laura Ingram's show with Dan Patrick, in which he says, in 18 years, every one of them, and I think he's speaking here of Central American migrants, every one of them in 18 years has 2 or 3 children. You're talking about millions and millions and millions of new voters, which is really interesting just in terms of like, well, yeah. I mean, there are going to be millions and millions of new voters in 18 years because people grow up and they become of age and they register to vote. But he is, losing his mind because many of them will be of Central American heritage and therefore probably not too favorably disposed to the guy who's screaming about how what a horrible thing it will be when they come to this country. But they might not be getting our news yet, so he might be safe in this. But in 18 years, every one of them has 2 or 3 children, talking about millions and millions and millions of new voters. This is trying to take over our country without firing a shot, which, of course, would be a foreign concept to them. The problem we have with this is that they're not firing shots. That's the issue. They don't love guns as much as we do. That's one. 2, of course, many of them speak Spanish. But what are you going to do? 3, they're vaguely brownish. They weren't born in this country and have pale skin like me, and it's important that everybody do that. They might take over our country without firing a shot. That would be something, right? What a horrible idea it would be to embrace those trying to take over our country without firing a shot. Mexico, if you're listening, you should try to do this because, and by the way, my encouraging you to do this makes me a great patriot. Not at all a traitor. I'm just saying, just because I'm appealing to a foreign power to help me personally take over this country without firing a shot does not mean it's a bad thing. He just used Russia instead of Mexico. Oh, and also failed, thank God. Unless the plan was to kill 680,000 Americans, in which case, success. Well done. As I was saying, or as Oliver Willis was saying, yeah, we took over the country because you were killing too many people. That's really kind of basic democracy, if you ask me. Anyway, I guess he wasn't the only one. That would include, what was her name? The congresswoman from New York, Stefanik. Right, yeah. She, I guess, also got the same memo, as I recall. Let me see if I can scroll back and find her screeching about it. That would have been late yesterday afternoon, I think, that I picked up on that. But she, too, claiming that the big Democrat plan was, in her view of it, was legalizing migrants so that we would be bringing 11 million new voters into the country and legalizing their votes so that we could take over the country and overwhelm Republicans and yada yada, the whole thing. And, well, it's an idea. It's something to think about. I mean, we might as well entertain it seriously because it would be a great idea to overwhelm Republicans with millions and millions more votes than they were able to muster. And we've tried this, and it worked really well. In 2020, and in fact, in 2016, we tried it, and it did also work well in terms of getting those votes. But for some reason, we said that Donald Trump should be president anyway, and then he almost ruined the whole country and killed 680,000 people. But, it was a good try. Our latest effort, though, we don't even really need the additional immigrants, as it turns out. We captured 7 million more votes than the Republicans did. They didn't like that, and they tried to overthrow those results anyway. So, on the other hand, maybe she's right, and it would be a good idea for us to try and incorporate another 11 million, because 7 million, getting trounced by 7 million votes wasn't enough to convince them that they weren't entitled to try to take over the government and put a stop to that. So if we could add another 11 million, maybe they would be dissuaded from trying this time. But who knows? They're very ambitious people. All right. Well, I think that catches us up with most of the super crazy. I got to find that Stefanik. Let's see. And the thing about the protest fizzling, and then the 300 showed up at the other protest. So notes to self to try and find those things for you. But I'm sure you believe that they're all true, because I'm a very nice guy. And, you know, I don't tell you bad stuff about that. I won't just make it up. And if I did, it would be better than that, for one thing. And also, in about a year from now, I would be very, very sorry about it and totally repent. So, at least we have that going for us. Let's see. In other COVID news, I can add this exciting announcement. This is a pre-announcement about the illness itself. Sarah Palin has seen fit to announce to the world that she is unvaccinated, according to Aaron Rupar, who captures the video of everything. She was on, I don't know what Fox News show. I don't know which Fox host that is. I think he's one of the famous looking ones. And anyway, she's unvaccinated. And let me tell you, by the way, they are on fire up there with the virus in Alaska. I don't know if she actually spends her time in Alaska anymore. She used to for a time, it looked like she was moving to Arizona. Does everybody remember that? I don't know whether they ever went through with that. No one knows, because no one knows what Sarah Palin is doing anymore. But even if she's it doesn't matter. Alaska or Arizona, they're both on fire with the virus. So there's no hiding from it up there. And I think they've been actually at the top of the list in the last couple of days in terms of whether it was new cases or deaths. I cannot recall off the top of my head. But yeah, they make the list fairly frequently with it, and it's because they have a pretty small population. So the number of cases that it takes to put them up at the top of the lists per capita is not a whole lot compared to other states. Anyway, so let's see. We've got that going on. Many more exciting stories. Let me return to the pocket reserve of stories for the big and influential stories that we can no longer fit in this segment before our first break, but we can tease you with and go over to that. Or, let's see, there's a couple of smaller ones too. Let me recommend to you, to those of you who either have plenty of room for more sin now that you've atoned, or those who don't believe in it at all and feel that they're free to take the schadenfreude of watching anti-vaxxers get COVID, I'll turn you on to this source of news on the web. I don't know how, I can't verify any of it. I'm sure they did. Maybe there's some links. SorryAntiVaxxer.com. With two X's, in case you were wondering. That's the official spelling of anti-vaxxer. SorryAntiVaxxer.com. That, alongside, there's a Reddit there's a subreddit, I guess, is what you would call it, that also tracks this stuff. The Herman Cain Awards, they call their collection of it. But I don't go to Reddit if I can help it. There's all sorts on Reddit, but I just find their organization something of a mess. This seems easier. SorryAntiVaxxer.com, just very straightforwardly, one at a time, finds the case studies, if you will, of anti-vaxxers and anti-maskers who catch COVID and die. I don't know whether they're all dead or what, but let's see. Here's one, the latest one at the moment. Some of them, better known than others. I don't know if anybody knows this person, but also a lot of them are, of course, social media influencers. So that means they have lots and lots of, Instagram type pictures, and it's somewhat ironic to be able to document their downfall through their own social media programs. And that's been, by the way, distilled down, I think, rather brilliantly. Somebody tweeted the other day that 4 stages of COVID denialism, the one being, it's all a hoax. The second one being, don't be a sheep. The third one being, prayers needed. And the fourth one being, visit our GoFundMe. So this one strikes me as the same sort of thing. Kristen Lowry, 40-year-old woman from Escalon, California, anti-vaxxer and an ex-vaxxer, which basically means that she grew up vaccinated against a bunch of things and then decided later on that she didn't want to be getting new vaccines, or at least this one vaccine. Well, guess what? She's at age 40, where she was immune and everything. I bet she had a strong immune system and even worked out. Dead of COVID. Just one of many examples here. According to this social media post, Kristen died from COVID on September 15th, 2021, leaving behind 4 school-aged children. Bad idea. And we feel bad for the kids. Hopefully they'll get their vaccinations. She was definitely anti-vax. How do we know it? There's the Facebook post, unmasked, unmuzzled, unvaccinated, and unafraid. Together we win was the meme that she put together with her photo. And there's her in a t-shirt that says ex-vaxxer, something, something, something. Free thinker, there's another one. These people love to meme their own photos and put these little graphics over their photos. Free thinker, question everything, research mandatory. I am vaccine educated. You know, the whole thing, all the stuff she had on Facebook, Instagram, etc. But then the news from Roxanne Bittner-Kalski announcing my beautiful niece has lost her battle against COVID. That is a loss. My heart is breaking for her 4 kids and her sister Cassie. And I guess we could probably find room to join her in that. But, wow. And her brother Kurt. We will miss her always. So many people need her here, but God must have special plans for her in heaven. You are so loved, Kristen, and you will be so, so missed. I wonder what the plans are, but, you know, those aren't ours to know. Anyway, I'm feeling bad already about doing this, but I just wanted to let you know about the resource. If maybe you're the kind of person that doesn't give a damn one way or another, you can enjoy that maybe more than I can. We'll be back in 2 minutes, hopefully with something less sinful. Thank you. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Network Radio. All right, let's see. I'll have to find, this. I got to tell you, the search for some of the things that I went on over the break for some of the links I wanted. Some successful, some not so successful. As I recall, I was telling you about the September 17th organizers, sort of, who were warning each other not to come because it was a trap, and using the term honeypot. And, well, I searched for that because that was a specific term that they used, and I got to tell you, mixed results, some of which is not at all what I had in mind for the program. Okay, very interesting, though, and makes for some fascinating reading if you have the time for it. You'll have to atone for that as well, but, you know, that's up to you. Like I said. All right, so changing directions, I think. I will find. I've got lots of notes for the things I want to find and share with you. I did find successfully. The first one was the news about the rally for which only 300 people showed up. I feel like we still owe you a little bit more about that one. And the top hit on that was actually a tweet from the Lincoln Project, which we don't give money to, but which, I don't know, a lot of people have a soft spot for. Anyway, they were tweeting just the other day, on the 13th, about it. In case you missed it, which we have on the show up to now, organizers of a Kentucky rally in support of former President Donald Trump, featuring several prominent allies and conspiracy theorists, expected some 10,000 people to show up this weekend. I guess it was this past weekend. Instead, less than 300 were in attendance, and Mike Lindell, the pillow guy, is prominently featured there. They used the report of Newsweek on this. Let's see if we can get a lineup of who was supposed to be there for them, or who was there. who was supposed to be there, was 10,000 people. But they didn't show. Just 300 out of the 10,000 they were thinking of. The We the People reunion, held at Muhlenberg County Agriculture and Convention Center Fairgrounds, in Powderly. Maybe we're pronouncing that right? Wrong? I don't know. Powderly, Kentucky. On Friday and Saturday. Mike Lindell, the My Pillow guy, Mike Flynn, the notorious spy, were there. Lynn Wood, the crazy idiot, was also there. And I guess this local news channel sent a team to shoot video at the event on Friday, but was asked later to leave. And I guess that's because it would have documented the fact that there were only 300 or so people there out of the expected 10,000. So, that is what it is. But it was pretty funny, and we'll take it. Okay, so let's see. Put away the Newsweek thing. It's got some video of something curiously captivating. I find myself sitting here watching them demonstrate a power washer so powerful that it can cut through wood and slice a watermelon in half. So if you're interested, Newsweek.com. I guess if you sit there long enough, you'll get that ad too. All right. So I needed to fill you in a little bit more. I think I gave you all the details of the other stuff. I couldn't remember where the rally was supposed to be, so I wanted to give you that news. All right. I'm going to run through the rest of Pocket. We'll start here because there's no rhyme or reason to it. Daniel Dale, our favorite Trump-era fact checker at CNN, having moved from, the Toronto Star? Is that where you got to start? Fact-checking some other stuff today, or yesterday. Incredibly dangerous. Trump is trying to get big lie promoters chosen to run the 2024 election. This, again, something we know. I think, we probably haven't discussed it straight on the show, so I thought maybe we would share this article, but I think we're all at least vaguely familiar with the idea that Trump has been promoting to the best of his ability, endorsing for election, people who are big lie supporters and running to administer the elections in their home states. I presume in the hope that they will be in a position to lie for him, big lie fashion, in 2024, should he survive to run in the presidential election, and that they will be more favorably inclined than the current crop of Republicans, say like the Raffensperger types in Georgia, that if he handpicks the team, they will violate their state constitutions and overturn their election results and hand over electoral votes to Trump that he lost. That's the plan. Anyway, so Daniel Dale, I guess, puts it together more comprehensively here. Swing state by swing state, former President Donald Trump is trying to get people who tried to overturn the 2020 election chosen to be in charge of the 2024 election. Trump's Monday endorsement of State Representative Mark Finchem in Arizona for Secretary of State is the latest in a series of announcements that has alarmed independent elections experts. Trump has now backed Republicans who supported his lies about the 2020 election for the job of top elections officials in 3 crucial battlegrounds: Arizona, Michigan, and Georgia, where the current elections chiefs opposed his efforts to reverse his 2020 defeat. I will say this, it's a cunning plan, but that's what makes me think that there's no way that Trump can pull it off. But the brilliance of the plan is that it offloads most of the work to people who may or may not be better organized than Trump and are self-interested in accomplishing this work. They would like to be elected to these offices, and they may or may not follow through in delivering votes, or they may or not even be in a position to do so because he might lose overwhelmingly in their states and they're just stuck. But if it were up to Trump to organize this, and he was picking the people and making them run and was responsible for turning out the vote for them and then giving them a game plan once they got elected into office and, having them execute that plan, it would fail because all his plans fail and he's a terribly stupid person and he'd never be able to make it work. But if he's the accidental beneficiary or even a purposeful beneficiary of other people's individual organization to take over their state elections apparatus, that might actually work. That's what makes it scary. So let's see. If people who have sought to undermine the 2020 election are running things in 2024, when Trump might be a candidate again, or could be dead of probably natural causes, experts and many Democrats fear that attempts to subvert the will of the voters stand a much greater chance of success. It is incredibly dangerous to support people for office who do not accept the legitimacy of the 2020 election. It suggests that they might be willing to bend or break the rules when it comes to running elections and counting votes in the future, said Rick Hazen, professor of law and political science and co-director of the Fair Elections and Free Speech Center at the University of California at Irvine. Someone who falsely claims, or he says claims falsely, that the 2020 election was stolen from Trump lacks credibility and cannot be trusted to run a fair election. Certainly true. We get the point of that. It is incredibly dangerous to support people for office who don't accept the legitimacy of the 2020 election. You could say, it would overlap entirely, but it's incredibly dangerous to support people for office who have no intention of honoring the responsibilities and limitations of that office in general, but more specifically, particularly dangerous for these people. Fincham, who has also promoted QAnon conspiracy theories, has been an especially aggressive promoter of the lies that the 2020 election was stolen from Trump and rife with, quote, rampant fraud. It was both rife and rampant, this fraud. Fincham attended the January 6th Stop the Steal rally in Washington and was photographed outside the U.S. Capitol that day. He denies any involvement in the riot there. And nearly 8 months after President Joe Biden's inauguration, he continues to urge Arizona legislators to somehow overturn Biden's victory in the state. By the way, it's like 19 years they've been, quote, auditing the vote in that one county, and no indication whatsoever of any end point to that exercise, because there's no point to that exercise, period, let alone end point. The problem for the country isn't only that prominent Republicans are supporting the lie that the election was stolen, but that many everyday party voters are insisting that their candidates support such lies. A CNN poll released on Wednesday found that 63% of all respondents correctly thought Biden had won enough votes to win the presidency, but that only 21% of Republicans felt that way, compared to 97% of Democrats and 64% of independents. Although I guess if Greg were here, he would remind you, there's always going to be 21% of every group that's totally crazy. And if you're winning 97% of Democrats and 64% of independents, that's just pissing in the wind. I mean, not you're winning it, pissing in the wind. I've constructed the sentence barely, but them complaining or trying to win these offices is. And I just wish that the wind was stronger and they were pissing carbonic acid and whatever. Again, not really something I should be doing right now. But you'd think that they'd realize that it was pointless. But these guys are, of course, convinced that they're the actual majority and that when push comes to shove, the American people will eventually come around to this. And they sometimes have a point. The point is usually, well, if we also endorse, white supremacy and white grievance, whether or not they actually believe us about the elections is irrelevant because they'll come around and vote for us regardless on a totally different basis. And maybe we can bring them around to belief in this, but it won't really matter so long as we're in position to do something about the agenda that we want, even if we were delivered there by pretending to be chiefly about this other part of our agenda, which we do believe in, but is secondary to what drives us. Anyway, where were we? 26 states have elections for Secretary of State in 2022. In addition to the 3 states in which Trump has endorsed so far, there is a key secretary race in Nevada, where Trump lost narrowly both in 2016 and 2020, and another in Minnesota, where he lost narrowly in 2016. And there is a secretary race in Ohio where Democratic Senator Sherrod Brown is expected to try to hold on to his seat in 2024. I don't know what that has to do with anything, but okay. I mean, okay, I see. They'll be able to manipulate the election outcome. I see. I thought they were like trying to hint that Sherrod Brown was somehow running for secretary or something, which is not the case. I missed a paragraph here. Colorado Secretary of State Jenna Griswold, who chairs the Democratic Association of Secretaries of State Political Action Committee and is herself up for re-election in 22, said in an interview on Tuesday with CNN that there's an extreme amount of concern about the Republican Secretary of State candidates who have promoted the big lie. Then we find out about the 26 states. While a secretary's authority varies from state to state, many of them have the power over critical elections processes. And we're into that, processes. And again, this, as Greg often says, is sort of it's akin to who has the gavel. They don't have gavels, but of course they have decision-making authority, which is pretty much the same thing. While a secretary's authority varies from state to state, many of them have power over critical processes, from who gets sent an application for a mail-in ballot to whose names are deleted from the registration rolls, to how many ballot drop boxes are permitted, to which voting technology is used, to the certification of results. That's what they're looking for there. In the very end, if all else fails, I can refuse to certify the results if, Joe Biden wins. Griswold says that if anti-democracy candidates are elected, and that's ironic, but, worrisome, you could imagine a Secretary of State refusing to certify election results, spreading lies to influence the agenda of state legislators, even posing an insider threat to election security. That's a good theme to continue on with, by the way. For the country to function, and the county, whichever, for either of them to function, Griswold said, it is essential to have state elections chiefs who believe in democracy and believe in facts, and will actually honor the law. Could we throw that one in there too? There are numerous Republicans running for Secretary of State positions, of course, some of them without a history of incendiary public remarks, but in Trump's endorsements so far, beginning with his backing of Georgia Congressman Jody Hice over incumbent Republican Brad Raffensperger, the former president has picked 3 candidates, and there's 50 states, but he's picked 3, who have been outspoken in spreading false claims about what happened in 2020 and have tried to get the results invalidated. It is a very interesting phenomenon. I mean, these people may have been motivated to do this anyway, but it is interesting, just even if they weren't, even if they're totally disingenuous, that they identify a shortcut to statewide elected office, which is, and of course, I assume they then hope to ride their status as statewide electeds to a possible Senate race in the future, or some of them who are state representatives and looking to move up to Secretary of State might first run for Congress, might on the House side, the more traditional path. But when you're a statewide elected, particularly, by the way, in states where there's a significant Republican base, but the senators are Democratic, and it looks like they'll always stay that way. Very often the Republican, it happens on both sides. People, when there's a lock on a Senate seat, they tend to put sort of sacrificial lambs up for the election, and a lot of them are just crossing their fingers and hoping lightning will strike. And I think that's what these guys see as sort of the express elevator to the top. You run for statewide office and win it, and then you're automatically, your name is in the hat anyway when the state party apparatus is trying to think about who will they put up against that senator that they want to dislodge. And you're just, you're there. You're a state, and the argument goes, I've won statewide, and this is going to be a statewide race. And it doesn't usually translate. Winning Secretary of State is not at all like winning a race for senator. People pay attention to the race for senator, and people barely know that there is a Secretary of State, and you can win with a very low vote total. But, like I said, lightning does strike. So I think some people are just trying to look to ride it that way. And then they're like, but, what statewide office could I win? I can't win for governor. I don't have that kind of organization. I got to win one of these low-profile races. Secretary of State is one. And some states have, like elected Secretary of Agriculture or, all sorts of things. And you try to ride it up there. I mean, like I said, it's happens on both sides, at least the idea of riding statewide elected office to the Senate. It's happening in Florida. What's her name? I can't recall offhand. The woman that we cited the other day who had such a great comment about Ron DeSantis. She's the leading candidate, or perhaps the nominee. I don't think they've nominated at this point. I think it's early in the race, right? But she too, statewide elected, but in one of those offices that's like, okay, well, it is a statewide elected office, but running against DeSantis. And lightning could strike. DeSantis is killing people left and right. And ordinarily you say, that's not someone I want in office. Anyway, back to the article here. I just thought it was interesting that these guys are sort of thinking, I don't know what I want to do as Secretary of State necessarily, but if this gives me an opportunity to find an agenda, then great. And for the first time, anybody, and in memory, people are allegedly excited about Secretary of State races. We're talking about the 21% of crazies who believe Trump's big lie are excited about the Secretary of State race. And that's a big danger, again, because in these low turnout elections, a crazy motivated base can win out over people who are like, I don't even know what Secretary of State does. But not only do they get an instant agenda, they just get an instant reason for being. I say, if all I have to do here is, if I say something like crazy ass-kissing about Trump, he'll endorse me, and then that'll be it. I'll win, because nobody cares about this race, and then I'll be in position to run for the Senate or for governor later on. So I think a lot of that underlies what's going on here. Also, some of them may be truly, honestly crazy for Trump. Possible. But I think what's motivating most of them is they just see it as an easy stepping stone. All I have to do is say, I really think he won the election, and he's such a great guy, and everyone loves him, and Stormy Daniels would probably want to have sex with him again just for free, just because how awesome he is. And for instance, like if you were John Barron saying something like that, you would get endorsed, and your career takes off. Or everything Trump touches dies. We'll see which is the more likely. So, Trump, whose endorsements typically carry great weight in Republican primaries, has made no secret of why he has been drawn to these candidates. Among other praise, Trump's endorsement of Fincham cited the candidate's incredibly powerful stance on massive voter fraud that took place in the 2020 presidential election scam. They parenthetically add here, there was no scam and no such fraud. His endorsement of Michigan Republican activist Christina Caramo, maybe I'm pronouncing it right, last week said, among other things, she is strong on crime, which means she very strongly likes crime, including the massive crime of election fraud, which she also likes and would like to commit on his behalf, apparently. Again, there was no massive crime. Ta-da! After CNN told Fincham on Tuesday that we were writing about Trump's endorsements of Secretary of State candidates who have promoted election lies, including him, he responded that he would not comment in detail because CNN is, quote, predisposed, I should just read this in Trump voice too, but the words are too big, predisposed to a narrative that is built on denying facts, is his view. On Twitter, he referred to this reporter as a hashtag fake news snake. Caramo's campaign and Heiss's campaign did not respond to requests for comment. Secretary of State races usually get much less attention than other races in midterm ballots, but Griswold, the Colorado secretary, said the events surrounding the 2020 election have increased the profile of the office, not only among voters, but donors. She said the Democratic Secretary of State PAC she chairs is having the best fundraising cycle ever. And this goes back to, reminds me very much of like the post-2004 race for Secretary of State in Ohio, right? Was it 2004 after Kerry lost the election and lost Ohio narrowly and people were worried about the black box electronic voting back in those days, right? And but that's when the Ohio Secretary of State job was sort of raised in profile. So this is just sort of history repeating itself here, I think. The race for Arizona Secretary of State post, which is being vacated by Democratic gubernatorial, one of my favorite words, gubernatorial candidate Katie Hobbs, will be one of the most closely watched in the country. P.S. Another example right there. Again, Democratic Secretary of State using the I've won statewide story to boost herself into the governor's race. We'll see how it works. I mean, it must work with some fair frequency or else people wouldn't keep trying it. So, you know, it's not a bad thing in itself. It's just a thing that people do. Anyway, that one will be one of the most closely watched in the country. Arizona, where Biden won by just 0.3 percentage points, is home to a partisan and problem-plagued so-called election, quote, audit that has inspired Republicans elsewhere. And again, we'll have to branch out into that because the long-threatened moves toward fraud it in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin are in fact underway at this point. Fincham faces serious competition for the Republican nomination. One candidate, State Senator Michelle Ugenti Rita, it's my best guess at that name, has been a leading proponent of additional restrictions on Arizona voting since before the 2020 election, before it was cool. Another candidate, which, by the way, it's been the Republican Party platform for a long time, so it's not that cool. And it's not cool at all, as a matter of fact. Another candidate, State Representative Shauna Bullock, I'm guessing again, put forward a bill earlier this year that sought to let the state legislature reject the will of state voters in presidential elections. And you know how much voters love having their will rejected, right? So they're going to be flocking to her campaign. 21% of them will, anyway. Bullock's bill, which was not passed, proposed to allow Arizona legislators to revoke the Secretary of State's certification of the results at, quote, any time until the presidential inauguration. So you can go through the process of voting in the Electoral College, cast the Arizona electoral votes for candidate A, and then on January 19th, or indeed on January 20th before noon, you can just say, yep, we changed the electoral votes. That won't be viewed favorably in constitutional light. Unfortunately, that doesn't matter anymore because there's probably 6 Supreme Court justices who would say, I'd just rather not view it at all. And then it stands. They shadow docket their way to the next presidency. And Bullock launched her own Secretary of State campaign with a statement in which she claimed a majority of voters, quote, now believe cheating likely affected the outcome of the 2020 election, without making clear that this is not at all true. So that brings us to the end of the article. Nicely done from Daniel Dale. He did mention that this is inspiring, or that Arizona is inspiring fake audits in other states as well. And you can, that's true by the ice cubes rattling in the background. We're filling up our drinks here, toasting the fake elections. That's all right. Don't worry about it. That's life broadcasting from the house. I just thought it was fun. So I mentioned to you that there's other stuff going on here. He links. Let's see what his article is, just for fun. Eric Bradner, CNN article. Republicans draw inspiration from problem-plagued Arizona audit. Although this is a relatively old article. This is from back in June. And I have something, I think, more immediately relevant. And let's start with, well, see, we're running up against the next break, of course. But there's 2 directions to go with this one. Republicans in Pennsylvania, I've got this story from the New York Times. Republicans seek Pennsylvania voters' personal information as they try to review the 2020 results. I think that's probably the more weird and frightening and inexplicable of the two stories. But again, something we'll have to stop discussing and take a break, but we'll return to. Let me start with this one. Nick Corasaniti, the writer for this piece. Pennsylvania Republicans moved on Wednesday to seek personal information on every voter in the state as part of a brewing partisan review of the 2020 election results, rubber stamping more than a dozen subpoenas for driver's license numbers and partial social security numbers. Because why should ballots be secret in this country, right? The expansive request for personal information, directed at Pennsylvania's Department of State and approved in a vote by Republicans on a state Senate subcommittee, is the first major step of the election inquiry. So again, note the procedure here. If you are successful in electing a Democratic Secretary of State or a Republican Secretary of State who believes in the rule of law and wants to protect voter information or wants to certify the result normally and according to majority vote, it doesn't matter. You've won that election, but so what? A Republican state legislature, if they lose the race for Secretary of State, Trump endorses somebody, and as you know, everything Trump touches dies, and he bombs horribly and is roundly defeated. Republicans still don't think that matters. If a Republican legislature remains in place, they'll simply, as they did in Wisconsin with the governor's powers, pass bills repealing the power of the Secretary of State to do the things he was elected to do, and instead transfer the power to themselves. So they're getting ready with that. Was the Arizona bill that failed that we read about in the last article. But here, the Pennsylvania state legislature moving to do just that. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. All right, what can we do to continue with this? Let me clear up exactly what's going on in Pennsylvania. I sort of took a sidetrack here, but it's a relevant one. And the Pennsylvania legislature, in addition to just generally considering stripping power away from the Democratic Secretary of State, in addition to perhaps stripping the power for the Secretary of State to do the certification of the vote, they're also basically demanding information via subpoena that the Secretary of State's office is bound by law, state law, to protect from unnecessary prying. You'll see what's going on here. I'll just read you the story. Rather than comment my way through it, we'll read more and then comment later. Ruin my promise in just a second, I'm sure. The expansive request for personal information directed at the Department of State, that would be the Secretary of State, right? And approved by a state Senate subcommittee, is the first major step of the election inquiry. The move adds Pennsylvania to a growing list of states that have embarked on partisan-led reviews of the 2020 election, including a widely criticized attempt to undermine the outcome of Arizona's largest county. Democrats in the state Senate pledged to fight the subpoenas in court, saying at a news conference after the vote on Wednesday that the requests for identifiable personal information were an overreach, lacked authority, and potentially violated federal laws protecting voter privacy. Senate Democrats, going forward, intend to take legal action against this gross abuse of power by filing a lawsuit, challenging in the courts, and to ask the courts to declare the Senate Republicans' actions in violation of separation of powers, as well as declaring that they had no authority to issue these subpoenas, said State Senator Jay Costa, the minority leader. I read this just the other day, and I'm not 100% certain of that strategy is the best necessarily. I mean, they're correct in saying that this is a major overreach. They're certainly correct, or they're potentially correct in saying that maybe the Senate subcommittee didn't have the authority to issue these subpoenas, and they might win on those grounds in court and thereby short circuit the whole thing. But I think I was inclined to say that I would be much more interested in seeing individual voters, although I don't know that they would be able to gain standing before the court, although I'm not certain that, the way things are going in standing jurisprudence, these state legislators might not be able to gain standing in court. But I don't know. I would be much more interested in seeing individual voters saying, this is a huge violation of my privacy and my right to a secret ballot. I'm suing the Senate Republicans. There was something that struck me, and I'm not certain whether I'm on firm legal ground with that or not. I haven't really thought it through on that. But there was something that struck me about the idea of the state Senate Democrats suing the state Senate Republicans that made me think, like, I don't know, it seems like we're avoiding the true fight here. But, maybe that's all that can be done. Democrats control several of the top offices in Pennsylvania. See, statewide races, right? Including those of governor, attorney general, and secretary of state. And it was not immediately clear what legal basis they might have to challenge the subpoenas. Nor was it clear how the transfer of information would begin to take place if it does proceed, or which people or entities involved in the review would control the information, which I think in itself could lead to a basis to challenge the subpoenas, or at least challenge the need to comply with the subpoenas. They may have been lawfully issued, but they just might have to be whittled down by a judicial review of their scope. The process by which you issued the subpoena was perhaps permissible, but the breadth of your request is not. The Department of State did not respond to requests for comment or issue a statement on the subpoenas. Josh Shapiro, the Attorney General of Pennsylvania and a Democrat, vowed to fight the subpoenas as well. There are legal consequences, and this is where the Attorney General really ought to be stepping in. This one I would say he's got to do. There are legal consequences to turning over people's private personal information without their permission, Mr. Shapiro said in an interview. My office will not allow that to happen, and people can be assured that we will take whatever legal action is necessary to protect their private personal information from this charade. And I would like to know, and I think the judges probably will want to know, what do you need this information for? I'm not certain what you're getting at with this. And it becomes clear, I think, from this article that there's a lot of confusion about that, and even the Republicans are confused about it. The subpoenas, 17 in all, are also included in a request for communications, also included a request for communications between state and county elections officials. They did not include requests for election machines or equipment. That's been the big attack point on the stupid Arizona fraud, that they've spoiled the ballots and the machines as well. But election experts are still expressing worries about the amount of personal information being requested and the security risks, both to voters and to the electoral process, that could come with such a transfer of information. Such risks have grown increasingly common in partisan election reviews around the country. That's a really bad idea to have private information floating around in a Senate caucus, said Marion K. Schneider, an elections lawyer for the ACLU of Pennsylvania. And it's really not clear how the data is going to be used, who's going to be looking at it, who can have access, how it's going to be secured, and it's unclear to me why they even need the personally identifying information. Republicans in several states have pursued similar reviews, misleadingly labeled, quote, audits, to suggest an authoritative nonpartisan investigation in the name of protecting election integrity, in quotes there, election integrity. The reviews have often centered on baseless claims and debunked conspiracy theories about the presidential contest, spurred in part by the falsehoods promoted by former President Donald J. Trump and his allies. What's sort of unstated here is, I guess for a while, I guess it's always been a dream of authoritarian elected officials and candidates. If there was only a way for me to actually get an accurate list of who in my neighborhood or whatever voted for me and who voted against me, then I would be able to egg their houses or burn them down or threaten them or something like that. And that's why we have secret ballots in this country. And every once in a while they come up with ideas like this one, where they think under some other guise I might actually be able to get a hold of that information, which would be otherwise, totally improper and illegal for me to get a hold of because allegedly America values democracy and the secret ballot. But if I could say, well, it's really about election integrity, and we're going to do our best to mask individual voters, identities, etc. We're just checking. Their excuse usually is, I want to match like ballots that were cast, particularly, I guess, in their view, mail-in ballots with, and the ballot requests with, census data and identifying information. It says here that 5 ballots were mailed to this address, 123 Elm Street here. By the way, if you live there, move out. I've just threatened you. But, 5 ballots were sent there. Are there 5 eligible voters who live there? I suspect, I know a friend of mine is a neighbor there, and they say there's only 2 eligible voters there, and they don't know who the other 3 are. And, sometimes that's true and sometimes it's not. You are a neighbor, but you forgot that you just moved there and you don't know that they have 3 kids in college elsewhere, but who vote at home. And you've only lived there 6 months, and so you've only seen the 2 parents out and about, or you've only seen one out and about because the other one is bedridden with COVID because she won't get vaccinated. Whatever it is. Partial information and supposition and suspicion of your neighbors drives this kind of thing. But they would like to use that premise, say, well, we want to check to match up the numbers and the names and the census, and we need identifying information like we're only going to take the last 4 of Social Security. People have sort of gotten used to the idea that they can give away the last 4 as identifying information because of other stupid invasions of our privacy elsewhere in the world that we've gotten used to. But, I guess if you think about it, well, how come the last 4 of your Social Security number is used sort of as shorthand for some sort of official identification? It's good enough for making purchases or signing up for health care or whatever the hell it is. Well, if that is enough to satisfy them that you are who you are, then it would be enough to satisfy a bank that you are who you are if you were looking to drain that account as well. So, I don't know. Anyway, the point is, that's information that they would love to have in order to be able to rig elections in their favor, or intimidate their neighbors into voting for them, or just have better targeting information to run an otherwise outwardly legitimate campaign. Just our mailers were magically 100 times more effective than anyone else's, dollar for dollar, because we just eliminated everybody who regularly votes Democratic. And you can get that information usually anyway through voter files, but they're looking for some sort of granular information that would ordinarily be denied to them. But they say, in the name of election integrity, we want this information. And then even if they get it and have no nefarious designs on the information, the fact that they're handing it to Senate aides and having them parse it and put it in spreadsheets and blah, blah, blah. What happens to that information along the way? We don't know. How secure are the Senate staffers' servers? How sure are we that the Senate staffers aren't selling that information to market, on the black market, to God knows who? There's a million ways that this information can leak out, because it leaks out all the time, even when the supposedly responsible officials are the ones in charge of it. It's a pretty major issue here. And I've got another story that touches on that, if I can get around to that. Let me get back on track here. President Biden, of course, won Pennsylvania by more than 80,000 votes, and the results have been reaffirmed by the state's Department of State. The entirety of our proceedings today, issuing subpoenas, is based on such a non-credible foundation, said Anthony H. Williams, a Democratic state senator who represents an area near Philadelphia. He added that it was, quote, very troubling and in fact leads us to darker days in this country, such as when hearings like these during the McCarthy era were held, where voices were silenced and liberties were denied, being bullied by the power of the government. State Senator Jake Corman, the top Republican in the chamber, who approved the reviews last month, portrayed the investigation as merely trying to inform future legislation and lashed back at Democrats asking what they were, quote, scared of. All we're doing is seeking facts, seeking information so that we can make better public policy, Mr. Corman said. And this is just obfuscation. Well, obviously you want facts to inform your better public policy, but, they're skipping gigantic steps in the logic. We obviously want election integrity. We don't want anybody who's not eligible to vote to be voting. I think most people probably agree on that, although we have different ideas about who ought to be eligible to vote, perhaps. But then they just leap from that to, well, we need to be able to legislate such that the integrity of the vote is maintained. Therefore, I need the last 4 digits of everyone's social security number. Why? We don't even put that on our ballot applications. Yes, but it is obviously information that people are sort of kind of used to thinking of as important, and so therefore, even though I don't know why, we definitely want it because it's important information, and we're all about important stuff here, plus integrity. Therefore, give me the thing. That's it. I mean, that's the whole argument. When questioned by Democrats about why voters' Social Security and driver's license information was necessary for the investigation, State Senator Chris Dush, and you can't spell Dush without duh, Chris Dush, who, by the way, has no H in his first name. It's C-R-I-S, Dush, and maybe it's not even a him. I don't know. We'll find out. See if there's any identifying pronouns in here. State Senator Chris Dush, who is leading the review as chair of the Governmental Operations Committee, brought up unspecific and unfounded claims that ineligible voters had cast ballots in the Pennsylvania election. Because there have been questions regarding the validity of people who have voted, whether or not they exist, Mr. Dush said, again, we're not responding to proven allegations. We are investigating the allegations to determine whether or not they are factual. That is a very interesting excuse as well. So just to repeat here, to make sure we all get exactly how dumb this is. Why do you need Social Security numbers and driver's license informations, Senator Dush? Dush says, because I heard that people who were ineligible voters cast ballots. And so you need my Social Security number because what? Well, because I don't know. Maybe somebody stole your Social Security number and cast a ballot. Maybe, but I mean, Social Security numbers aren't on the ballots, so what are you going to do? Well, I'm going to use it to match that to data about where you live, and then I'll use that to match it to data about the ballots. And I'm not really sure how all this works, but the point is Social Security numbers are individual identifying information, and we're going to match that somehow to ballots, even though that's not on the ballots. And we only have the last 4 digits, and lots of people are bound to have the same last 4 digits out there. And I'm sure, I guarantee you, eventually we're going to end up getting a report that says we found 100,000 ballots that were invalid or questionable in the Pennsylvania election. And then they'll get on the TV about that, and they'll blare it around the Republican wing nutosphere. And then about 30 minutes later will come out, people will say, no, that's, you all you did was match the last 4 digits of Social Security. And there's only 9,999 different combinations there can be, and there's 100,000 ballots that you're talking about. What you're saying is you ran a match on the last 4 on the Social Security number, and you found 100,000 matches, which you're going to find because you're only using 4 digits out of the whole state. Yeah, but by that time, the headlines will already be out there. Republicans identify 100,000 suspect ballots in Pennsylvania. So anyway, but worse than that, Dush goes on and says, well, we need the numbers because there have been unspecific and unfounded claims of ineligible votes having been cast. He doesn't say that. That's the conclusion of the Times writer. But he's saying, well, I heard that people cast ballots that were invalid. So therefore, Social Security number, making no connection whatsoever. Then he goes on to say, this is interesting. And people are like, yeah, but I don't understand. The Social Security numbers won't prove anything at all because they're not on the ballots. There's nothing you can prove with them. Why do you need them? And he says, well, if we could prove it, I mean, that's really the basis. If we could prove it, then this investigation would be over. We wouldn't need to investigate because we would already have proven it. That's the whole point. Don't you get it? You're so dumb. We need this information because it hasn't been proven, and we might be able to prove it later. What? No. The inquiry here is if you can prove or demonstrate in any fashion a need for this information, you might get our agreement. Or you might get a judge's agreement that you're entitled to it. So what's your proof that there's any validity whatsoever, any connection whatsoever between the Social Security numbers and your ballot inquiries? Well, I don't know what it is. But if I knew, then I wouldn't need it. Now, would I? That's what he's saying. And then he continues, I guess, with some word salad to throw on top. If we have the sum errors within the voter registration system, SUM, if we have the sum errors within the voter registration system which allow for such activity, then we have a responsibility as a legislature to create legislation, yes, which will prevent that from happening in future elections. Therefore, give me your Social Security number. That's it. A chief concern of Democrats beyond the subpoenas was which people or companies might gain access to the stockpile of personal information of the nearly 7 million Pennsylvanians who cast a ballot in the 2020 election. State Senator Stephen J. Santasiero, a Democrat from the Philadelphia suburbs, pressed Mr. Dush on his selection process. Mr. Santasiero asked specifically whether any of the vendors that the Republicans are considering have ties to Sidney Powell, the lawyer who has popularized many false conspiracy theories about the 2020 election. And the answer to that is I really don't know, because this is not something that is relevant to my determination, Mr. Dush responded. So it's possible then? Mr. Santasiero asked. It is absolutely possible, Mr. Dush said, and at least that was honest. That's true. It's just, I don't know. Okay? Could you find out? Well, I don't know because it's not relevant. In what way do you mean it's not relevant? I think it's highly relevant. Well, it's not relevant to me making this decision because I was going to make this decision anyway. Well, he's a champion of circular logic and also logic that doesn't enclose any defined space whatsoever. And, wow. So, I mean, that's kind of how it's happening out there in Pennsylvania. So, yep, stealing all your personal information. I'm sure that won't be misdirected at all. No underpaid legislative staff will sell it to a corporation or to Sidney Powell or Lynn Wood for that matter. And all will be fine, I'm sure. All right. I have also on this Steve Bannon from over at MSNBC. New Republican election audits, in quotes, are off to a truly ridiculous start. There's another one happening in Wisconsin. Nearly a year after Trump's defeat, Republicans in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania are launching unnecessary and utterly ridiculous election, quote, investigations. Arizona Republicans' utterly bonkers, quote, audit of the 2020 presidential election has become the stuff of legend, but not in a good way. As a bipartisan group of local officials in Maricopa County put it in May, the outlandish process is a, quote, spectacle that is harming all of us, adding, our state has become a laughingstock. And it has. Haha. But with so much of the GOP fully invested in the big lie, Republican officials elsewhere remain eager to repeat Arizona's mistakes nearly a year after Donald Trump's re-election defeat. In Wisconsin, for example, GOP legislators recently agreed to spend up to $680,000 in taxpayer money on an entirely unnecessary investigation into ballots that have already been counted multiple times. Making matters worse, the Associated Press reported this week that the state's election clerks reacted, quote, with a mixture of concern and confusion to the first inquiry made by a special investigator hired by Republicans to examine, unquote, the state's 2020 election. As Rachel, that being Maddow, explained on Tuesday's show, the inquiry came in the form of a strange email from an unofficial account and an unknown sender, requesting the preservation of election records. Not surprisingly, several Wisconsin counties said they intended to ignore the mysterious correspondence and await official instructions. The investigation is being led by former conservative Wisconsin Supreme Court Justice, Supreme Court Justice. And you know they're not political. Michael Gableman, although they are because they're elected in Wisconsin, I think, who made up his mind about far-right conspiracy theories before his examination even began, as judges will do. Gableman is a Stop the Steal activist who's publicly sought to undermine public confidence in the election results. While these developments unfold in the Badger State, Pennsylvania Republicans, also invested in the big lie, have moved forward with their own, quote, review of the election, despite the fact that the state has already conducted post-election audits confirming the accuracy of the results. The Washington Post reported yesterday on GOP state legislators approving subpoenas for a wide range of data and personal information on voters. We just heard about that, though, from the New York Times. Let's see. Anything else that they wanted here? There's the driver's license, names, date of birth, driver's license, last four social, address, and methods of voting. All that information for millions of people, 7 million, who cast ballots in a May... Oh, I'm sorry. I guess it is all 7 million, because whether you voted in the May primary and or the November general election. That's quite a list. Remember, there's literally no evidence of election improprieties in the Keystone State. There was an election, the votes were tallied, the votes were certified, audits found no irregularities. No one anywhere has produced any credible proof of problems with the state's balloting. A couple of Trump voters were caught trying to cast illegal ballots on behalf of dead relatives, but they were easily caught, and in a state in which roughly 7 million Pennsylvanians voted, or a Commonwealth for that matter, the vanishingly small number of Republicans who tried and failed to commit fraud was inconsequential. GOP legislators are nevertheless investigating for no reason, and they're jumping in with both feet. Pennsylvania Republicans' opening gambit is to request names. Well, you got all of that. Not in response to improprieties, but in the hopes of turning up evidence that might bolster conspiracy theories they've already decided to believe. That's the facial reason for doing it. And whatever hidden reasons there may be for getting everyone's name, social security number, address, date of birth, yada yada, I can only guess at. What could possibly go wrong, he wonders. Circling back to our earlier coverage, the state Senate's top Republican, Jake Corman, President pro tem, recently told a conservative media personality that he and his GOP colleagues are justified in this partisan exercise, not because there's evidence of wrongdoing, but because they think evidence of wrongdoing might emerge if they keep looking for it. I don't necessarily have faith in the results, Corman said last month. I think that there were many problems in our election that we need to get to the bottom of. I don't know what any of them are, but I do think that. By all appearances, Corman lacks faith in the results because voters in his state had the audacity to support the Democratic ticket, just as Pennsylvania voters did in 2012 and 2008 and 2004 and 2000 and 1996 and 1992. His hunch has nevertheless led to expansive subpoenas for millions of voters' personal information. Marion Schneider, an elections lawyer for the ACLU in Pennsylvania, told the New York Times, I think we already read that one because we read the New York Times article, but basically, really bad idea to have private information floating around in a Senate caucus, right? Not clear how it's going to be used, not clear how it's going to be secured. Court fights over these subpoenas are inevitable. Watch this space. And others, I'm sure. There's more craziness out there as well. Let's see. This, I think, related, but slightly different. But again, back to Nick Corasaniti. GOP election reviews create a new kind of security threat. As Republicans continue to challenge the 2020 results, voting equipment is being compromised when partisan insiders and unvetted operatives gain access. We learned this story happening mostly in Arizona, but I think it looks like there's information about other states possibly too. Late one night in May, for instance, after surveillance cameras had inexplicably been turned off, 3 people entered into the secure area of a warehouse in Mesa County, Colorado. I don't think I know about this yet, where crucial election equipment was stored. They copied hard drives and election management software from voting machines, the authorities said, and then fled. The identity of one of the people dismayed state election officials. It was Tina Peters, the Republican county clerk responsible for overseeing Mesa County's elections. What was she doing sneaking around in the dark of night for this illicit information copying mission? Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning. I have good news to report. Many more listeners like you are making critical contributions that keep our show on the air. It makes good sense, of course, and patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple. Now you can make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for helping keep you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all of your support. We literally could not do this without you. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. Okay, hoping my mute button works properly. I knew that this was familiar sounding. I was sure I had a story about this from earlier in pocket somewhere, and indeed I do. And let me open it up. Actually, the August 17th report. I don't know if I'd be able to even access it now. So, yeah, I mean, now I think it's firewall. But a Denver Post piece. FBI investigating alleged Mesa County election equipment breach. And I put that aside and never got back around to it. I think I probably pocketed it just after returning from Costa Rica, and, well, many other things happened. But now that I can't share it because it's paywalled at this point, I might just as well bring you up to speed with this late update on it from Nick Corasaniti. I really want to go with teeny, but it's Niti, not, okay. Well, anyway, as I was saying, right. So the really strange thing was the Republican county clerk of Mesa County, Colorado, was one of the three people caught on surveillance cameras. Well, not caught on surveillance cameras because the surveillance cameras were turned off, right? But then breaking into the warehouse and copying all of the hard drives from the voting machines. So what's Tina Peters doing there? How the incident came to public light was stranger still. Last month in South Dakota, I remember we started in Colorado here. Last month in South Dakota, Ms. Peters, the Mesa County, Colorado clerk, Ms. Peters spoke at a disinformation-drenched gathering of people determined to show that the 2020 election had been stolen from Donald J. Trump. That's what kind of person she is. And another of the presenters, a leading proponent of QAnon conspiracy theories, projected a portion of the Colorado software, a tool meant to be restricted to elections officials only, onto a big screen for all the attendees to see. The security of American elections has been the focus of enormous concern and scrutiny for several years, first over possible interference or mischief-making by foreign adversaries like Russia or Iran, and later as Mr. Trump stoked baseless fears of fraud in last year's election over possible domestic attempts to tamper with the democratic process. I would add that it goes further back, of course, as we hinted earlier when we were talking about the black box voting worries of 2000 and 2004. But I think it really caught on with electronic voting machines after 2000. After, ironically, the debacle in Florida with the ballots and the hanging chads and everything, the solution that was proposed was electronic voting machines, and then everybody realized we don't know what the hell's going on inside electronic voting machines. Without a paper trail, you could just say, the other person won. Here's the data, and just, either make up data or say, I don't know, we don't know what the data says. Here's the totals. We just program these machines to total the votes. What else do you want to see? Anyway, it's ironic because that was largely driven initially by Democratic-leaning activists. And they had a point, in that, we really need to be able to kind of examine the machines and have them audited from time to time before they're purchased anyway, and make sure that, they're just, we ought to have election experts be able to hire IT experts to say, let's make sure that the programming inside these machines is seriously nothing but, okay, count the votes as the buttons are pressed, as opposed to hiding an algorithm in there that says every time that a button is pressed for a Democratic candidate, it casts, another vote for a Republican, or just switches them, or whatever the concern may be. So I say it's ironic because, of course, now the Republicans making the same sort of charges, and what's most interesting about it is all along, Democratic-leaning activists who were worried about this stuff, particularly back in 2004, were constantly told, well, you can't have the machines coding because that is proprietary. A private company makes these voting machines, and they've got an interest in making sure that the proprietary work that they've done to build these things stays confidential, for competition reasons, so that no one else steals the code and makes their own version of it and can enter unfairly into competition, which is a very weird thing for us to be worried about at this point anyway. Oh no, competition in voting machine manufacturing. But okay. But at any rate, the point was that Democratic activists were stymied in their case in most instances of trying to get a hold of the machine's coding and the raw vote data for their own examination. And Republicans likewise would have been stymied ordinarily if courts sort of followed precedent. We don't know how they would have fared in court these days, but if the Trump campaign's track record post-election of 60 cases and losing them all is any indication, they were probably right in assuming that they would have been stymied in pursuing this information in court. So they just broke in and stole it and then gave it out to people at their big conferences, which, it's not directly national security information or anything, but, last guy that did that had to flee to Russia. So, okay, we're just going to do it. And I'll just continue being the county clerk, by the way. I don't see any information in here about Tina Peters being arrested. But we'll read on. The security of American elections has been the focus of enormous concern and scrutiny for several years, right? And that's how I got it to trace back to even earlier than the incidents they cited here. But as Republican state and county officials and their allies mount a relentless effort to discredit the results of the 2020 contest, the torrent of election falsehoods has led to unusual episodes, like the one in Mesa County, as well as to a wave of GOP-driven reviews of the vote count conducted by uncredentialed and partisan companies or people. Roughly half a dozen reviews are underway or completed, and more are being proposed. These reviews, carried out under the banner of making elections more secured and misleadingly labeled audits to lend an air of official sanction, have given rise to their own new set of threats to the integrity of the voting machines, software, and other equipment that make up the nation's election infrastructure. Election officials and security experts say the reviews have created problems ranging from the expensive inconvenience of replacing equipment or software whose security has been compromised to what they describe as a graver risk that previously unknown technical vulnerabilities could be discovered by partisan malefactors and exploited in future elections. That's an interesting thought, right? Beyond stealing the data or corrupting the data or ruining the machines, the county elections clerks are partisan. They might, rather than breaking into the warehouse, be able to get permission to do a, legitimate, quote unquote, legitimate and authorized audit of the software. And and whether they add something to the software or not, they could discover a flaw in the software that's exploitable and not fix it. And just say, no, we checked, and, well, I'm a little embarrassed, but gosh, everything seems to be working just perfectly. When in reality, I mean, this is just, I guess it's made up as a possibility, but it's in the New York Times, so I get to read it. Isn't that great? Thank you for laundering this idea. But you find a flaw and you just say, note that, write that down. And then when we'll have an election, right now I'll say this machine is perfect and totally invulnerable to attack, even though I know that it isn't invulnerable. In fact, it is vulnerable, and I plan to attack it. Let's use this, exploit it, pack another 10,000 votes in there for Trump at the end, and say he won Mesa County, which, in the long run isn't worth much. But, of course, if everybody, if other counties are using the same machine, I guess there's 100 and something counties out there, thousands of counties across the country that use the same machines, and that could sway the results of the election. And no, I just told you, look, I'm a Republican and I was looking for fraud and I didn't find it. This stuff is ironclad. There's no way it's corruptible. Wink, wink, right? That is a possibility. In Arizona, election officials have moved to replace voting machines in the state's largest county, Maricopa, after conservative political operatives and their unaccredited people gained extensive access to them as they conducted a widely criticized review of the 2020 results. In Pennsylvania, the Secretary of State decertified voting equipment in rural Fulton County after officials there allowed a private company to participate in a similar review. And in Antrim County, Michigan, a right-wing lawyer, remember Antrim? A right-wing lawyer publicized a video showing a technical consultant with the same vote tabulator the county had used, alarming county officials who said that the consultant should not have had access to the device or its software. So they videotaped the crime, and now everybody's like, damn, that's weird. When such machines fall into the wrong hands, those of unaccredited people, for instance, lacking proper supervision, the chain of custody is broken, making it impossible for elections officials to guarantee that the machines have not been tampered with, for example, by having malware installed, or just having existing malware detected, for that matter. The only solution, frequently, is to reprogram or replace them. At least 3 secretaries of state in Arizona, Pennsylvania, and Colorado have had to decertify voting machines this year. Far from urging panic, experts caution that it would be extremely difficult, if not impossible, to meddle with voting results on a nationwide scale because of the decentralized nature of American elections. But experts say that the chain of custody for election machines exists for a good reason, and it does. But also, I don't think that denial takes into account the possibility, anyway, of there being, say, a flaw discovered in the, XYZ company's voting machines, which are, in fact, used in thousands of counties. And so there would be an easy and centralized way to exploit that flaw in lots of places and in a diffuse effort to change the vote totals. That's not really accounted for here. But anyway, experts say the chain of custody for elections machines exists for good reason, which it does. Already this year, 3 federal agencies, the Justice Department, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, forgot there was one, and the Election Assistance Commission have issued updated guidance on how to handle election machines and preserve the chain of custody. There are some serious security risks, said J. Alex Halderman, a professor of computer science and engineering at the University of Michigan, who studies election security, especially given the constellation of actors who are receiving such access. It's a very kind way of putting it. Republicans say they are simply looking for the answers their constituents are demanding about the 2020 election. Of course, Republicans are telling their constituents what answers to demand, but never mind all of that. This has always been about election integrity. Karen Fann, the Republican leader of the Arizona Senate, which authorized the state's elections review, said in an interview posted on the state party's website last month, nothing else. Absolutely nothing else. This is about making sure that our votes are counted and ruining the machines that count them. Security experts say that election hardware and software should be subjected to transparency and rigorous testing, but only by credentialed professionals. Yet nearly all of the partisan reviews have flouted such protocols and focused on the 2020 results rather than hunting for security flaws. In Arizona, the firm chosen by the Republican-led legislature, Cyber Ninjas, had no previous experience auditing elections, and its chief executive had promoted conspiracy theories claiming that rigged voting machines cost Trump the state. The company also used Republican partisans to help conduct its review in Maricopa County, including one former lawmaker who was at the January 6th protest in Washington that preceded the Capitol riot. And I think we're talking about Fincham, the guy we heard about earlier in the show, who's got Trump's endorsement for the Secretary of State job. How will he, as Secretary of State, review the eligibility of the machines that he and his friends broke into and perverted? Oh, these things are great. Let's use them. In Wisconsin, Republican Assembly Speaker Robin Vos is pushing for a review of the 2020 results to be led by a former state Supreme Court justice. We just heard about that one from Steve Bannon, who claimed in November that the election had been stolen. And in Pennsylvania, Republican leader of the state Senate announced hearings that he likened to a, quote, forensic investigation of the election, saying it could include issuing subpoenas, which they did do, to seize voting machines and ballots. Oh, they didn't issue subpoenas for the voting machines, just everybody's information. Christopher Krebs, the former head of the Federal Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, he's the first of all, the discoverer of the Krebs cycle. I think we all know that. But he was the guy that said, no, the 2020 election was not only secure, it was one of the most secure ever. And no, it wasn't stolen from Trump. But he was a Trump appointee, and everyone was mad at him. You remember that guy. Well, he said such reviews could easily compromise voting machines. They're designed to. Probably. The main concern is having someone unqualified come in and introduce risk or introduce something or some malware into the system. Now, the secondary concern I would add is that they find one that's already there, which I thought was a great point from this article. You have someone that accesses these things, has no idea what to do, and once you've reached that point, it's incredibly difficult to kind of roll back the certification of the machine. Decertifying machines effectively means replacing them, often in a hurry and at great cost. That's a problem all by itself. Philadelphia's elections board rejected an earlier GOP request for access to the city's elections machines, saying it would cost them more than $35 million to buy new ones. In Arizona, Secretary of State Katie Hobbs, Democrat, told Maricopa County in May that her office would decertify 385 machines and 9 vote tabulators that had been handed over for the GOP-led election review. The issue with the equipment is that the chain of custody was lost. Ms. Hobbs said in an interview, the chain of custody ensures that only authorized people have access to it so that vulnerability can't be exploited. So far, the best defense thrown up against it by responsible officials is to say, all right, well, if the Republicans seize control of these things, then we'll decertify them. Now, what happens if Republicans are the secretaries of state to whom the decision falls by law, whether or not to decertify these things once Republicans have tampered with them? What if Republicans tamper with them and people say you should decertify them and the new Secretary of State, a Republican endorsed by Trump, says, no, we will not decertify them. We will use them. As a matter of fact, we are going to copy the software and use them in every county. And everybody has to use this software, which has been in the custody of Republican-hired programmers for the past 6 months, and there's nothing you can do about it because I'm the Secretary of State. And I say we're able to do it. And of course, in states where there are still Democratic secretaries of state or people who care about the actual, rule of law and say, no, we're going to decertify them. Well, in those states, Republican legislatures may say, well, we're changing the law. The Secretary of State no longer has the responsibility for certifying or decertifying election machines. The state legislature reserves that power for itself, where it can decide it on a partisan basis. Why not? What would there be in the way of doing that? Nothing. Pulling compromised machines out of service and replacing them is not a foolproof solution, however. One way of which I've just demonstrated. The equipment could have as yet undiscovered security weaknesses, Mr. Halderman said, and this is what really keeps me up at night. He said that the knowledge that comes from direct access to it could be misused to attack the same equipment wherever else it's used. That was the good point that I thought they made earlier. As an example of his concerns, Mr. Halderman pointed to Antrim County in northern Michigan, where, months after a court-ordered forensic audit in the county, a lawyer involved with the case, who has frequently shared election conspiracy theories, still appeared to have access to a Dominion voting system's ballot scanning device and its software. The lawyer, Michael DePerno, posted a video from a conservative news site featuring a technical consultant who went to elaborate and highly implausible lengths to try to show that votes in the county, which Mr. Trump carried by a wide margin, could have been switched. County officials said this could not have happened. The device and its software are only supposed to be in the possession of accredited officials or local governments. I was shocked when I saw they had a tabulator in their video, said Cheryl Guy, the county clerk, who is Republican. Neither Mr. DePerno nor Dominion Voting Systems responded for requests for comment to requests. Easily the most bizarre breakdown of election security so far this year was the incident in Mesa County, Colorado. The first sign of suspicious activity surfaced in early August when a conservative news site, Gateway Pundit, posted passwords for the county's election machines. Hello, arrest. Right? The result of a separate breach in the county from the same month. A week later, the machine's software showed up on large monitors at the South Dakota Election Symposium organized by conspiracy theorist Mike Lindell, the guy who could only muster 300 people in Kentucky last weekend. Jenna Griswold, you've heard her name already today, the Colorado Secretary of State, said her office had concluded that the passwords leaked out when Ms. Peters, the Mesa County clerk, enlisted a staff member to accompany her and surreptitiously record a routine voting machine maintenance procedure. Gateway Pundit published the passwords a week before the gathering in South Dakota. Ms. Griswold's office is investigating and has said that Ms. Peters will not be allowed to oversee elections in November. That's good news, although I guess she's still the clerk there. They're just going to bar her from overseeing the elections. Peters, who has called the investigation politically motivated, did not respond to repeated requests for comment. In an online interview with The Pillow Guy, she admitted to copying the hard drives and software, but insisted she had simply backed them up because of some perceived but unspecified threat to the data. She also cited unfounded conspiracy theories about Dominion equipment and probably offered no explanation for why she turned off the security cameras. I was concerned that vital statistics and information was being deleted from the system or could be deleted from the system, and I wanted to preserve that, she said, which would otherwise normally be a possibly plausible excuse, except then why at night with the security cameras off? I was busy during the day. And I don't look good on camera. I'm embarrassed about that. But she flatly denied leaking the passwords or software. I did not authorize anyone to post any election data or software or passwords online, she said. And even if true, that just raises the same questions that everybody was raising in the Pennsylvania state legislature. Look, even if it was all an accident and none of you were complicit in the release of this information, it's released. And it wouldn't have been but for your action. That's the problem. All right, we continue. Even so, the Secretary of State's office said that Colorado counties had never been advised to make copies of their election machines' hard drives. It is a serious security breach, Ms. Griswold said in an interview. This is election officials trusted to safeguard democracy turning into an internal security breach. Again, just to emphasize this point, right, we've all heard at great length during today's recitation of these articles that the key issue here is the chain of custody for these elections machines, the election machines. If you violate the chain of custody, if you break the chain of custody, you got to decertify the machines because you never know what happened to it, right? Well, here, I mean, the chain of custody is trusted because you say, well, at least these machines, even if I don't trust the machines or their manufacturer, at the very least, we know that trusted officials whom we've elected and then thereby authorized to be the ones watching these things, keeping these things under lock and key, at least we know no one else has touched them. Now we're finding out that the people who we trusted to be the only ones allowed to touch them are the ones stealing the information from them and leaking it out. Right? Now, at some point, this is going to come up in a case, and we're going to run into one of those things where, once again, our legal system just never contemplated stuff like this. They'll be like, we got to decertify these things and get new machines, Democrats might argue. And Republican Secretary of State or the Republican county clerks will argue, why? The only basis you have for decertification is a break in the chain of custody. And this chain of custody was never broken. And the only answer to that is no, it was never broken. It was just never effective in the first place because custody was turned over to a thief. But a thief verified and authorized by being duly elected and handed this authority under the state constitution or the county charter or whatever it might be, depending on the levels, right? The chain of custody wasn't broken. And this law says the only reason for decertifying the machines is a break in the chain of custody. There wasn't one. In this case, they might be able to say, well, the idea of you going in secret at night and turning off the security cameras and doing this is not official work. Otherwise, you would have done it during the day with the cameras on. So obviously, the chain of custody has been broken. It was one and the same person. The person who was elected as county clerk did this crime, but the crime isn't in the course of your duties. And, a real judge would say, yeah, we can't actually allow that. We decertify these things. A Republican appointed judge might say, look, the people said they wanted the chain of custody to reside in this person, and it has resided in this person. They committed all sorts of crimes, maybe, well, they had the custody, but the point is, no chain of custody breach, no decertification. That's what the law says. But the law never contemplated that the elected Secretary of State or the elected county clerk would do this. That's right. It never did. Of course, we have the opportunity to contemplate that right now, but, probably Joe Manchin will filibuster it or something, or the equivalent on the local level. It's very worrisome. It is a very serious security breach, like as Griswold said in an interview about this. This is an election official trusted to safeguard democracy turning into an internal security breach. A mole for the other side, right? Whoever that might be. The local district attorney has opened a separate inquiry into the episode and is being assisted by the FBI and the Colorado Attorney General's office. Ms. Griswold, a Democrat, said she had also alerted the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, but Ms. Griswold said she worried that with so many Republican leaders leaning into the big lie, the risks of what she called an insider security issue were growing. I think it's incredibly time sensitive that elections are set up to guard both from external and internal threats, she said. And that's the end of the article and kind of just the point we were making there. Now's the time to anticipate just such a threat. Yeah, that's actually quite troublesome and very worrisome. And I have a feeling that, she's absolutely right. Certainly, so many Republicans leaning into the big lie, there's a huge risk there. And on top of it all, of course, is the risk that Republican-appointed judges will either simply refuse to see it or find some really ultra-narrow view of the law under which they say their hands are tied and can do nothing, or the Supreme Court at some point somehow shadow dockets their way out of this one. You get the idea. It's awfully troublesome when the chain of custody falls to a big lie Republican and their activity is overseen by a big lie Republican judge, like the former Supreme Court justice in Wisconsin, who seems poised to oversee the fake audit there. it's awfully worrisome. Don't you think? So I think I've worried you enough for the weekend. The music says that's all the opportunity I have to worry you for the weekend. Lots more stories, though. Don't worry. There's plenty to worry you with next week. But now it becomes the job of Justice Putnam and the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy to worry you. And here is exactly how they do it. We have broken the chain of custody on this information, stolen it from Justice by reading his texts to me. Mark Zuckerberg will scare the crap out of you first. Disregarded internal warnings about divisive, hate-filled content swirling on Facebook and decided to do nothing. Right, although he did go stand-up paddleboard.
From
Was that
networksradio.com, you have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
No, I believe it was something else, something motor-powered, right? Carrying an American flag, so it's all good. Anyway, what else has he got? A federal court halted a Trump-era health order to quickly expel migrant families. Glad that got halted. But you'll be glad that the rest of the news isn't halted when Justice joins you in just a second. Stay tuned and see you next week.